Good afternoon. Welcome to the New York Beef Council demonstration on briskets, prepping, smoking, slicing, and enjoying. In front of me here I have a beef brisket, which is the pectoral muscle of the steer. This is probably the second toughest muscle on the carcass as far as the fibers. When you think of fibers, think of milkshake straws and think of cocktail straws, with milkshake straws being your thick, heavily worked fibers, and your cocktail straws being your very thin, very lightly used fibers. For example, if you were to look at this closely, you can see how thick those fibers are, because this is the chest muscle and there's constantly working. So what do we got to do? Well, we got to clean it up. We got to understand that it's full of fat, a lot of collagen. We got to understand how to cook this. Well, let's start by trimming it. So, how much trim do we take off? Well, you can see there's some heavy fat right through here. Okay, this is all that chest muscle, all that chest fat. So we're going to take that down, but we're not going to take it down to where we're going to hit any of the red. We would like to leave at least a half, maybe 3/4 of an inch, if possible. So we'll take it off in layers so that we can be sure that we're not digging in too far. Now, if you do dig in a little bit, it's not a big deal. It's not going to ruin a piece of meat. Brisket fat has its own flavor. Brisket fat has, that's what you're not supposed to do, okay? Brisket fat has its own flavor. It's not like fat from the chuck. It's not like fat from the loins. It's got a unique flavor. It makes an awesome hamburger. You take one of my favorite blends is a brisket untrimmed and knuckles. Knuckles, not knuckles like bones in your fingers, but knuckles meaning the thigh muscle of the steer. You take that very lean muscle and you take this very fatty, flavorful muscle, and you put those two together, and you got one hell of a burger. Really do. Take a little bit more off down here. And again, you know, try and make nice, even strides with the knife so it's not all hacked up. And what it looks like now is what it's going to look like when it comes out. So if it's all hacked up going in, it's going to be hacked up coming out. This one started out about 16, 17 pounds. By the time I'm done trimming it, I'm going to lose 3 or 4 pounds probably by the time I'm done trimming it. Then you put it in the smoker and you smoke it for a whole bunch of hours, which we'll talk about later. You're looking at losing 30% of the weight because of the shrink and because of the fat melting. All right, so now here we got a major wedge of fat here. A lot of loose material here, okay? Just nicely trim it off. Okay, then we're going to come underneath. I want to try and get some of this out. Not all of it. I want to take it all out because fat is flavor. This one here will take about 14 hours to cook. Now, a lot of that also has to do with your temperature. The way I learned how to do this was to stay under the boiling point. Now, what's boiling? 212. We need to stay under that, 205, even 200. And if they're really big, if you do get lucky enough to get an 18, 19, 20 pound brisket, yeah, I go up to 210. All right, I'll go up to 210, but I won't go above that. And the way it was taught to me was, we don't want the fat to boil out. We want the fat to melt in. All right, and that's how I was taught, and it works. It really does. It really does work. All right, so we got a little bit out here. I took a fairly good sized wedge off of here. See, we're pretty clean here. You don't have to get crazy. This is all going to cook off. You don't have to get crazy. You don't have to be worrying about taking this fascia off of there. No need for that. So now, in my business, I would save a portion of this fat and we would roll it into hot dogs. If the meat that we happen to be using is just too lean for hot dogs, we'll add this to fatten it up a little bit, and the flavor is just over the top. Never wash the meat. Okay? Never ever wash the meat. There is absolutely no need for you to take this and put it underneath the water and rinse all the minerals off of it. Absolutely, totally waste of time and just unnecessary. Okay, so then we carved out some of the fat. We left some in there. If you can't feel the fat moving under your fingers, there's probably too much. It's got to have a give to it. Okay, it's got to have a give. If you can't push it, it's going to be too heavy. Okay, we carved it down. We left, maybe 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. We're pretty solid. We're ready to go. I think a real barbecue guru can probably do well telling the difference between the different woods. But a lot of times you can't. And I'm going to be honest with you, I've tried many times to say, oh, this is cherry wood, or this is oak wood, or this is maple. You know what? I hate to say it, but smoke is smoke. And does it impart a flavor? Well, I need somebody to really prove to me that it makes that much of a difference. And I've done sassafras, I've done apple, I've done oak, maple, I've done them all. All right? And we still think that for our needs, the oak is the best. If you go to Texas and learn about this, like as I did, it's oak or it's mesquite. Okay? Now, for me, mesquite does definitely impart a flavor that I don't care for. But that's just me. The further north we go with barbecue, it gets a little bit different. The cooking method doesn't change, but the taste changes a little bit. Down south, it's a whole different world. Up here in the Northeast, it's much milder barbecue, okay? I could give you my recipe that I've been using since '06, but you're going to take it and change it to what you want to do anyway. So that's okay. That's all right, because everybody, it's their own thing. This recipe happens to work very well for us. That's why I don't want to change it. Can I make it hotter? Sure. Can I make it sweeter? Sure. Can I do it with no salt? Yeah, it's going to be terrible. It's going to be terrible. I can tell you right now. And I feel bad for the dietary restrictions who can't use salt. I'm sorry, but there's some pretty good salt substitutes out there. But you know what? Without salt, you're not going to do this piece of meat any justice. All right? You got to, and kosher salt. Do not use iodized salt. Use kosher salt. It's a much cleaner taste. A much cleaner taste. Salt and pepper, equal amounts. Equal amounts. When it comes to the salt, you want to make sure that you're using a kosher salt. And please be very careful not to use iodized salt or salts that contain any kind of anti-caking agent. There's a difference. Different companies make different things. So that's going to be up to you to pick. But we do not use anything with anti-caking, and we do not use any iodized salt at all. Okay? So just watch here. I'm going to show you. Just take some in your hand and just sprinkle it over. You got to show it some love. Okay? Okay, now, I don't like to rub. I kind of pat, push in. I don't rub that much. I do rub a little bit on the sides, like here. But for the most part, I like to push it down into the fat. Now, maybe you're thinking, or maybe you should be thinking, how soon after I season it do I smoke it? In the perfect world that we all live in today, overnight. We're going to season this now, and I'm going to smoke it tomorrow. That's what I always do. This gives the chance. The salt will pull some of the moisture out, and it's going to work itself into the meat so much better. That is, I can tell you, a difference, because that I can definitely see a difference. Because there's times where I just maybe I get a big order on the fly and I just don't have time to let it go overnight. I believe it does make a difference in the flavor. It gives the meat more depth in flavor. So, get it in. Here, now see here, I got to rub this in because, see how it falls off? Rub it in. Don't go crazy. You don't need to put so much on there. When this is done, you don't want to taste just seasoning. You want to taste that awesome brisket fat and that absolute brisket flavor. Here's the bottom side now. Look at how nice that is. It's almost a shame to cover it, isn't it? Now that this is completely seasoned and we want to let it rest overnight, put it on a sheet tray. If you have a rack, because it's going to purge, there's going to be a little liquid that's going to work itself out of this. If you have a little rack to put it on, that's fine. Put it on a sheet tray, on a rack if you have one. Not necessary, but if you do, it's better. Cover the whole thing with plastic, slip it in the refrigerator. See you tomorrow. Let it rest. Let the seasonings work themselves into the meat. So you're probably thinking, how do I smoke this? What am I going to do with this? Where am I going to put this thing? Okay. Well, in a perfect world, you would have an indirect smoker. You would have your chamber where you would put the meat, and on the side of that, you would have this little box where you would have your fire and your smoke. And then there's a little chimney that comes up the side. You're going to build your fire here with your wood or your charcoal, your lump, whatever you might be using. And you're going to monitor that, get it to the temperature you want, and then you're going to put your brisket in. Fat side up. Fat side up. Because remember, we don't want the fat to boil out, we want it to melt in. So you got to have that fat side up. Leave it alone. Get it in the middle. If I had a three-tiered smoker, I would want my brisket in the middle. Because I want that smoke and that heat to come up, I want it to pass across, and I want it to go up. Okay? If you don't have that, if you're going to have to do this on a grill, again, keep it up, keep the heat low. If you're working with a propane burner grill type thing, you're going to have to turn it over. You're just going to have to turn it over. You just can't cook it on one side. You're going to have to turn it over. If you're going to do indirect, then stay in the middle. Go in the middle. Don't put it directly over top of it. Because you kind of want everything circulating around this thing. Our smoker is a rotisserie smoker, and it's got a fan that blows the whole time, and it's computerized to 5-degree differential. Okay, so it goes up to 210, shuts off, goes down to 204, turns on, up, only 5 degrees, keeps turning on and off. But indirect, in the middle, get a good flow. Get your fire going first before you put the brisket in. Get comfortable, get it set up, and you're holding temperature for a little bit. Then you go ahead. Then you just got to keep, you're going to have to monitor your air intake. You're going to have to see how much, do I have to add some more wood? Do I have to add some more coals? What am I using? Are you using pellets? It's what you want to use. I like real wood, personally. In school, we used to use lump wood, chunks of wood at the culinary. But we would soak that wood. You want to soak it. If I'm using a log, I'm not going to soak it. Could I? Sure. Have I? Yes. I don't think it's necessary. If you're using the lump wood, the chunks of wood like this, you're going to want to soak that. You're going to want to soak that. Because otherwise you're just going to catch fire. You want it to smolder and smoke. That's what you want. Okay? You don't want it to catch fire. Once I was satisfied with the time and temperature of the brisket, I took it out. I wrapped it in food grade plastic, and then I wrapped it in foil. And then I just kept it in the oven to keep it warm. Okay? I held it at about 200 degrees. The plastic is going to keep it steaming the whole time. The foil is going to keep the plastic from melting. Okay? And the plastic is not, it's food safe. It's okay. It's food safe. All right? So that's how I would store it just prior to slicing, if there's going to be an hour delay, 2-hour delay, whatever between the brisket being done and the actual time of service. or the actual time you're going to have your dinner, all right? But when it's hot in the smoker, we'll take something, fork, usually a big fork, we'll stick it into the meat and we'll turn it, okay? If we feel it start to break, if we feel the meat breaking at the end of the fork, we're good to go. If it doesn't and wants to come back like a rubber band, go have another six-pack because it's going to be a while. It takes a while, but when it turns quick. You know, it could take, if I got that little rubberiness, it could sit for another hour and a half. But right then and there, all at once, boom, it's just going to be, okay, everything's going to release, the fibers are going to relax, and it's going to be just awesomely tender. Keep in mind that every time you open that smoker, you're adding time, okay? Everybody wants to see it. You know what? You don't have to see it, okay? Look through the side holes or something, the vent holes. Look in there. Take a flashlight. Don't open it. You keep opening it. You keep fluctuating that temperature up and down, up and down, up and down. We have a cooker that we use that people want to see what's in there. Every time I open that smoker, I lost 20, 30 minutes because just big puff of hot air comes out and then you got to wait for it to recoup. So let it go. What you want to watch something? Watch your temperature. Watch your 200, your 212, your 210. Keep an eye on that. Don't look at the brisket. The brisket, let it surprise you when it's done. Okay? Because when you see this, you're going to understand why. Okay? All right. So, again, I took it out of the smoker an hour and a half ago. I wrapped it in plastic. I wrapped it in foil. I put it in a hotel pan. And I set it in the oven at about 200 degrees. You can see the juices are already running. So I would say maybe you should put a sheet tray underneath you to catch all this stuff. Yeah, it's still hot, nice and hot. All right, so there we have it. See now how the plastic didn't melt? It just kept all that goodness inside. All right, so now I'm going to open this up to about 12, 13 pounds of deliciousness. Well, it's a pretty good rule of thumb is you're not going to go less than 10, 12 hours. That's a standard rule of thumb. But then again, if you could push your finger through there, look, watch what I do with my finger. Watch. I'm going to push it right in. Boom. That's done. That's done. If it was hard to go in, if I had to struggle, it's not done. But look, done. All right, it's finished. Fork tender, yes. All right. Here we go. One of the things that you should watch with brisket is the direction of the grain. You can still see it here. It's going to change direction a little bit. You got to be careful. I should probably have shown you this on that raw one first, but we could always go back to that if you want. But you want to stay across the grain the whole time. You want to stay across the grain. There's two sections of the brisket. We have what we call the point cut, where you have that second layer, that decal that's on top. It comes to a point. Then we have the flat cut, which is the back side. Okay. I always, personally, what works for us, we slice fat side up. And I always start at the point. Now you've heard of that term bark. Okay, well here's some bark right here. All right. Go ahead. Look at that. Look at that smoke ring. That is not an artificial smoke ring. That is the real deal. How do you get an artificial smoke ring? Okay. Well, there's an item out in the industry called sodium nitrite, pink salt, tinted curing mixture. It's used in hot dogs. It's used in anything smoked. Well, you can get an artificial smoke ring by just taking this brisket and putting it in a vat of sodium nitrite water. Okay? You take a cup of sodium nitrite, a couple gallons of water, 3-4 gallons of water. You put it in there, you let it sit there for maybe 10 minutes, you pull it out, and then you go ahead and smoke. As soon as the sodium nitrite hits the heat, it turns pink. That's why hot dogs are pink. That's why bologna is pink. Olive loaf, pink. Liverwurst, pink. Because of the sodium nitrite that's in there. So that's how you could gain a false smoke ring, I guarantee you this is not a false smoke ring. This is gas, propane, over wood, and there it is. All right, so that's bark. You want to try some of that?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead. Okay. The grain is running pretty much this way. It does turn a little bit, but right now, the grain is running this way. Your fibers, maybe those big, thick milkshake straws. I don't like to go straight down. I like to go on an angle, okay? On a bias. Carve away. Picture your fibers. Picture cutting, again, milkshake straws. If we had milkshake straws and we had them all bundled together, that's your fibers in your meat. If we cut them straight down, you got all these little circles, okay? Tender, sure. If I took those little circles and I elongated them, gave more surface area to those, it'd be much more tender, okay? You shouldn't really go more than 1/4 of an inch. Even that's kind of, I would go less if I could. Okay? I can come this way. See how my grain's running? I can come this way and carve. You're going to pick up a lot more fat this way. The item's going to be tender no matter what happens. Okay? Again, one more, and then I'll show you the accordion. See how it just pulls apart? You want to know when it's done? If you can do that, instead of it just bouncing back, and you can't, if you have to struggle to pull it apart, it's not done. This is perfect. This is absolutely perfect. The flat cut, now that was the point cut, cut 2 different directions. The flat cut, again, on an angle. I'm going to start this now. Look at those juices flowing. And this has been out of the smoker for 2 hours. Okay? This has been out of the smoker for 2 hours. Look at this.